Hi folks, Slick Slices here. This is going to be a short little video which I am about to title The Return of the Silver Tern. Now, I've mentioned this knife several times in the past, but it's been AWOL for a long time. I bought one of these for my brother for his 30th birthday, which must have been in 1995, so it gives you some idea of the vintage of when I bought this one, because I bought this one before I bought his. I bought his because I liked mine. So must be the early 90s that I bought it. I know where I bought it as well. I bought it in a gun shop in Edinburgh called Dixon's, but they're no longer there, unfortunately. It's now a barber shop. So they used to sell barbers and shotguns and really nice fishing rods, Hardy's fishing rods and things like that. But now they just sell barber coats, which is sad, but it's the way of the world in Britain these days, unfortunately. Anyway, this little Silver Tern. Now, this was my genuine, literal, everyday carry for a decade. And it would probably still be my everyday carry. What prompted me to start changing things was the fact that this is a backlock, and a backlock is now officially a weapon of mass destruction in UK law, and there's the assumption that anybody that goes out with one of these is obviously going to wreak havoc and start murdering the population. I think it's very unlikely that if you do, you're going to choose the Silver Tern as your weapon of choice. Now, this isn't a particularly special knife. It's special only because, or to me, it's special only because I had it for so long, and it's showing its wear. I mean, the fact it's all stainless steel. It's stood up remarkably well. It kind of earns a place in my knife collection, not just because I've had it for so long, but because I collect Japanese-made knives, and this is a Japanese-made knife. So I'll just run through some of the markings on it. I mean, there's a very distinct blade edge. Now, this is a electronic etch on it, but it's stood up remarkably well. It just says Silver Tern vanadium stainless steel, which is, I suppose, is supposed to sound very significant. Obviously, it has a little nail nick on there, and also we have a Tang stamp, which I don't know if that's in focus or not, but whether it is or isn't, it says 440 stainless. 440 stainless Japan. Oh, there it is. It's actually in focus now. I couldn't read it because the lights were too shiny. And then on the back, there's no markings at all. Now, when it comes to who made this, it's difficult to know for certain. One thing that's probably clear is that it was made in Seki City, and I say that because one of its larger brothers was a prototype for one of the very first Spyderco knives. I know this because I've seen a picture of a very early prototype of a Spyderco knife, and it's very clearly based on one of these knives. It has a piece of metal which I believe was a bolt that was cut down and welded onto the back of the blade to create the Spidey hole. And then there were a few changes made to the shape of the handle, but the distinctive holes in the handle and its overall shape are reasonably distinctive. That I'm pretty sure that it was a bigger brother of these. Now, when I bought this, I remember there were 3 different sizes, and they were all called silver somethings. So there were different types of bird. This being the tern. I think there was a buzzard, and I can't remember there was another one as well, but I may be making that up because, like I say, this is a long time ago. This is 25 years ago or more. But more than, maybe even as much as 30 years ago. So it's difficult to know. But I know it was a prototype for one of the early Spydercos, and I know that the early Spydercos, well, Sal Glesser, when he first went to Japan, was introduced to Japanese knife makers by Almar, and Almar had his knives made by Moki, and that's been pretty well established as being true, and I have reason to believe that he introduced Sal Glesser to Moki, and that Moki therefore made some of the early Spydercos. Now, this is of a similar vintage to the Silver Tern. This is a little Spyderco. I think it's probably the first iteration of the Ladybug. There's no name on it, so it's hard to know. But I suspect that these knives came from the same factory. The fact that they were both also sold by the same wholesaler to the same retailer to the same customer as me at about the same time also adds weight to that, though it proves nothing in and of itself. But to think that these knives have that sort of common ancestry, and that we still see that ancestry in knives like the Dragonfly, which I've just stabbed myself with today. There's a slightly larger version, but it's very similar. I know that with the Silver Tern started turning into the early Spydercos, which you may remember, were of a steel construction rather like this, and then when they went into this sort of plastic moulding, which I find very reminiscent of the Higanakami, particularly the style of rivet is very similar to the Higanakami, and it's still, though it isn't a rivet anymore, it's now a screw, but it still has a very similar similar look to the Higanakami rivets. But this is these are sort of integral FRN moulding, just in the same way that was, with a simple mid lock. Now there's obviously been developments between this one and this one, because this is riveted, this is screwed. Even the pivot's screwed on this one now. The pivot was just literally a pin that's just pressed in there, which is more reminiscent, incidentally, of the earlier knives. I suspect these were all made in the same factory, but it's I can't prove that, and Moki just simply plain deny it. But that's not surprising, as they almost certainly have a confidentiality agreement. I also suspect that this little knife has similar origins, as being a Folkniven. A Folkniven incidentally means folding knife. So although most of the knives they make these days tend to be fixed blades, I think this one is very much in that pattern of the one-piece moulded FRN with a pinned in mid-lock, and these now, because they all have screws in them now, they're not riveted anymore, but that's just a change in the way of the world. But the Folkniven obviously has certain amount of generic shape, similar in style to the old Silver Tern as well. Obviously it's got more of a almost like a sodbustery shaped belly to it, whereas this is a little bit thinner and more pointy. But I think all these knives have some common origins, but the real reason I'm showing you this knife is just because it means something to me. I've had this for a long time. It still sharpens up nicely. It's not lost too much of its steel, because I like sharpening knives, but I'm not desperate to lose all the steel off a blade by sharpening it too often. So I tend to just use a strop just to keep an edge on my knives and not to sharpen them. But I did sharpen this up recently, So it's got a nice sort of semi-polished edge on it. I just did it with the Workshop Precision Knife Sharpener, and you can get a decent edge on it. It's difficult to get a really good polish, but I'm hoping to get hold of the upgrade. It's not available in the UK yet, as far as I can tell. If anybody knows different, please tell me. But it's a sort of semi-polished edge, just using their ceramic stone, and then a little bit of a strop. So anyway, I'll not witter on too much about it. It's nothing particularly startling about this knife, except it does, I think, there is some historical value in it. In fact, I'll just briefly show this. I need to do a video on it at some point, but I've got to do some working out to find out a little bit more about it. But this knife here, relatively heavy action for a lockback. Oh no, I can get it in. I didn't know if I could get it all in. Now, if you look at this knife and you compare it to this knife, you imagine that you filled those holes back in, and instead that it had, I think 6 rather than 4, but holes drilled in it there. And then you look at this end and you think, if you hadn't trimmed this corner off, and it still had a corner more like that, there's an awful lot in common with these two. They're also marked 440 stainless, Japan. This one does say design patent pending. Now, the spider hole was protected right from the outset as a trademark. Now, design patent and trademarks are complete two different things, but if this is, and I suspect it has some early connection with the Spyderco knives, exactly what their connection is I don't know, but this is very much looks like the prototype that I've seen a picture of. This has clearly been made with the spider hole, so the blade has been ground to this shape rather than having a piece welded onto it as the prototype had. But I suspect this has some connection with the early Spydercos, whether it is officially so, or whether it was a Japanese knife maker ripping off the early Spyderco designs or not. I don't know, but I just know that there is some connection in these things, and one day I'll find it out. I've tried asking Moki, you just get a straight, oh no, we never made those. And that may be that they're telling me the truth, but I suspect that's more a factor of the non-disclosure agreements that they've got with as a maker of knives, as an OEM maker of knives. You get the same if you talk to like Riat or whatever, but you can see design cues in knives from China and say to yourself, I know that's a Riat knife or whatever. That I think this is the same. I suspect this is certainly a Seki City knife. I suspect they're probably both made by Moki. If they're not, they're made by the same manufacturer in Japan. The fact that Salglesser the fact that Almar was working with Moki, and that he introduced Salglesser to having knives made in Japan, just put there's a bit of a smoking gun outside Moki's factory gate, I think. So I'm pretty sure that there's a connection there, but we'll never know. Maybe one day we'll do. I'd be interested to know who makes the Dragonfly, and if we kind of find that out, I suspect there's too many similarities between that, and it could be that there is another manufacturer involved. Anyway, there's an awful lot of rubbish that flies around in my mind, but I'm sure there is something in this, and one day I will get to the bottom of it. In the meantime, did I remember to say like and subscribe? If I didn't, please like and subscribe, and you never know, you might get some more rubbish out of my mouth. But that'll do for now. Thank you. Bye.